In January 2000, the Smithsonian American Art Museum closed for 6.5 years for renovation. This was much longer than we anticipated. We thought we would only be closed for 2 years. So the main galleries were closed, but we were open on the web during that entire period. And during this time, much had changed about the web, about web development in general and how it relates to museum practice. In the fall of 2004, our web team proposed creating a blog, and as you can see here, we were very determined to do that. I'm just kidding, this is the last one. Our reopening, I should wait until the translation. Before I forget, I have to take a picture of everybody to tell my boss that I was not here as a tourist. Okay, so that's proof. Anyway, okay, so our reopening had provided an opportunity to look at our museum practice in very different ways. Our goals were to engage our audiences in new and exciting ways, and we wanted to connect visitors' experiences with the artworks in our collection. And a blog seemed like a very interesting way of doing this. But this presented a very different way of working for Sam. New content was going to have to be produced at a very accelerated rate, much more than we were used to. And as we were gearing up for our reopening, each office had a very large workload. So the big question was, how much time and resources would this project take from offices outside of information technology and new media? New media initiatives is the office under information technology. Right, okay. So Bill Taylor, who is editor of Fast Company magazine and author of a book called Mavericks at Work, Why the Most Original Minds in Business Win, has posed an interesting question. How can we be both a disruptor and a diplomat? That is, how could we propose something very radical and very revolutionary for the museum and yet be sensitive to our organizational environment? On the one hand, we wanted to engage audiences to create online dialogues about our artworks. And I should also say that a lot of the slides are artworks from our collection. And this is a piece by Paul Cadmus called Bar Italia. So we wanted to engage new audiences in new ways, yet we wanted to be sensitive to the way that our museum worked and to the comfort level within our museum. So our strategy was to move slowly, monitor progress, and adjust whenever necessary to ensure success. This is a piece by Namjoon Paik called Zen for TV. So why did we want to publish a blog at SAM? With the reopening, we had the opportunity to engage visitors in new ways. We were opening the Luce Foundation Center for American Art, which was an open storage facility that would house over 3,300 art objects in open storage. Now we have about 40,000 artworks in our collection, and anybody who works at a museum will know that at any one time, there's just a very small fraction of our collection out in the galleries. So this was going to allow people to see even more artworks than were in the galleries. In addition, we were opening the London Conservation Center, which would allow visitors to see how we conserve artworks in an open laboratory and studio, so people could watch the conservators conserve art. Our web team wanted to connect our online visitors and our web offerings with our about to be reopened galleries. This particular gallery is called the Lincoln Gallery. Our building in Washington is the third oldest federal building in the city. And in this particular gallery, Lincoln had his second inaugural party in this particular gallery. So anyway, our blog would be part of a larger SAM initiative where the public now draws very few distinctions between the bricks and mortar, that is our museum, and our online presence. It would be part of our long-tail strategy to publish continuous and searchable flow of micro-content. And we wanted to aim this at many different audiences. In addition, when I proposed doing a blog, I saw the opportunity to connect with younger audiences, 20 and 30-year-olds, who are getting most of their news and cultural information online. In the long term, these young people would eventually become 60 and 70-year-olds with cultural capital, time, money, and even art collections. So I saw the blog as an initial way to cultivate new audiences in the long run. So the project fit well within our museum's mission to connect Americans' experiences with our artworks. It reflected the museum's tagline as we reopened, a destination museum for the 21st century. So connecting our collection and museum activities with the social network known as the blogosphere would bring new audiences to our museum's websites, and we wanted to use viral marketing, that is, to create a buzz as we readied the museum for its debut. So how did we go about proposing to do this project within SAM? Well, it wasn't exactly like this. And it wasn't exactly like this either. First, we began by assembling a blog team. And as you can see, we were very methodical in our practice. Of course, I'm kidding here. This is way too many people to run a blog. Our initial blog team included the Chief of Information Technology, the Jefe, the Information Technology, the Head of New Media Initiatives, and myself, lead producer in New Media. We also asked our head curator, who was a key authority, of course, on our collection, to join us to evaluate blog stories. And having her on board and excited about the project helped give the blog credence within the museum. So by having our head curator sign on to this project, it gave a signal to the rest of the museum that this was important. Our publications department would edit each post, and I should point out that our web editor is in the publications department in our museum. Sometimes they're in information technology, but at our museum they're in the publications department. And this also would add to the comfort level because the publications department has been responsible for the museum's voice throughout the history of the museum. Once the project was initially approved, we hired an outside writer with both blogging and art history experience to be our main blogger. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Early on, I put together an initial scope of work, and as we moved forward, I designed the look and feel of the project, aside from being a web designer, I also am a graphic designer, so I was designing the blog. I recommended a content management system, which is Typepad. We used an outside service to host our blog. And I was responsible for the identity of the project. Now, these are a series of names that I went through. I looked up art terms on the internet, and going through all of them until I came to eye level. And eye level means at eye level, so I thought it was appropriate and everybody loved it. So, you know, that was really great. But I also created a PowerPoint presentation to show the rest of the key staff what we were about to do. Now we started this in 2004, and it's hard now to realize in 2008 where we were in 2004, but blogs were not as ubiquitous as they are now, and a lot of people had no idea what this was. So when I designed this initial PowerPoint, and again, I'm using this to convey what our project is about to people within our museum. When I first did this, I concentrated a lot more on the structure of the blog. You know, I showed slides of, you know, the story and the comments and a list of past stories, just showing how the blog looked. But in showing this to the staff, I realized that that was not important at all. We were going to use this to show to our director to get final approval. So talking to the staff beforehand and showing this gave us a lot of ideas of what we should and shouldn't do. So I realized that, let's see, yes. So I realized that I was focusing on the wrong thing in terms of getting an approval. And I changed the PowerPoint to really focus on what was really important, and that is everybody was concerned how much extra work this was going to be for the other offices. And that was really good to know. So as we were preparing for our reopening, all the departments were very busy with their own projects, and adding yet another undertaking to what they had to do was not going to be a very good thing. So it was really important early on to show how we could sustain eye level with a limited amount of help from the rest of the museum. Once we got approval, our hope was the blog would build community, connect to our museum's mission, and be used as a powerful marketing tool in a conversational mode rather than in a broadcast mode. And by that, I mean, rather than just disseminating information from the top down, as is the history of museums, where the museum is the authority and all the visitors just get the information one way. We wanted to start to create a dialogue between our visitors and the museum itself. This may not seem very radical now, but it was extremely radical in 2004. And it's still within our museum. It's still often a hard sell. So, because this was so new, we needed to take this slowly. We started by publishing stories internal to the blog team itself. We wanted to be familiar with the types of initial content that we would present and the workflow as we went from the initial idea for a blog story to its final publication. After the first few weeks of publishing internally within the blog team, we opened this up to just the museum staff for their input. And 2 months later, we went live. So we were taking this very, very slowly. Now, it's important to point out that the decision to publish iLevel, our blog, internally, indefinitely, if we had to, was really critical to make sure that everybody was comfortable within the museum with what we were doing. This is an Edward Hopper print. So defining the parameters of our blog before we started publishing was important. What did we want to talk about, and how did we want to talk about it? Early on, we decided that our workflow could not support quick, spontaneous blog posts that react to current events. A lot of people think a blog is only a journal where people are reacting right away to what's happening in short, quick bursts. But we thought of ourselves more like the New Yorker magazine than the New York Times. The New Yorker magazine will often publish a story about a current event maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, but it's longer, more detailed, and more reflective. And that's the way that we wanted to work. We wanted to convey a sense of quality about what we said. Now, one of our early concerns was about controversy. It's an inevitable part of blogging, and yet there are ways to be prepared for it when it occurs. All comments on iLevel are moderated. I see all comments before they go live. And if there is a controversial comment, generally what we'll do is we will say thank you for commenting. This is a very interesting point. Let us think about it and we'll get back to you. So this provides two things. It provides the commenter the sense that we're listening. It also gives us time to react and write a good response to what they're doing. Sometimes if there's a question about what a commenter is saying or what they mean, I'll often write them before I publish the comment and say, is this what you meant? Or did you mean this? And oftentimes they'll write back and they'll say, thank you, yes, no, I meant this in reality. So the comfort level of your own organization will determine the controversy limits that your organization will be willing to tolerate. And I would suggest that you think about this zone and discuss it openly before you ever decide to publish a blog to limit surprises. So while our initial proposal was to do 2 posts a week, given our workflow and given that we couldn't react really fast, we thought that 2 posts a week was a good metric. Sometimes we make that, sometimes we don't. I'm happy to say that we will have 2 blog posts a week. This week, while I'm gone, I've set that up. We had enough in the hopper so that while I'm here, we will have that. But there were 2 major exceptions to this 2 posts a week rule. One was the weekend that we reopened the museum in July of 2006. We decided that we would blog live right from the museum. Our offices are about a block away from the museum, so we set up sort of a blog central in the museum itself during the opening day, and it was very festive. A big department store was sponsoring a lot of activities for kids, and so there were thousands and thousands of people at our museum. And so we actually blogged 8 stories that weekend, and that was a record for us. The second one was last November when we opened our interior courtyard. Norman Foster, who is a British architect, has done this wonderful canopy, which I'll show you in a minute, and we also blogged live then. So now that the museum was open, we had to shift our attention to a new reality. we were no longer ramping up to reopen, and a lot of our stories, as we were leading up to the reopening, were showing behind the scenes as we brought artwork into the museum, through large artworks through third-story windows, and you know, crates in galleries, et cetera, et cetera. But all of a sudden, after this opening, we were open. So we had to reconsider the types of stories that we were doing. We started to publish stories that mainly had an image with just a short caption. This allowed us to shorten the development time for blog posts. We could show things like a conservator fixing an artwork. And we adjusted our workflow to create these quick posts. So with the Lewis Center for American Art and the London Conservation Center, we started to connect our web content with our museum offerings, our bricks and mortar museum offerings. We also created another category in the blog called Picture This, in this case, I'm sorry, where we highlighted interesting objects within the Lewis Center, the open storage area. And again, this was a way of bringing interesting aspects of the museum to the surface, our long tail strategy. Now, I want to just stop a second and say, we had one main blogger. Sometimes a couple of us who actually work in the museum. Our main blogger was an outside consultant. Sometimes I would blog a post, but it wasn't sort of an heavy art post. That was more something, you know, light going on at the time. But part of the challenge is, with a small staff, how do you keep this going? Recently, now that we've been blogging for 2.5 years, we're starting to get other offices, other people within the museum interested in blogging themselves. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting with the people who work at the Lewis Center, the open storage area, and we now have 3 new bloggers from the Lewis Center who will be blogging stories about the Lewis Center, starting initially once a week, but maybe doing twice a week as they get going. So now that we have more people, it's going to be easier to meet that 2 blog posts per week challenge. With organizational blogging, a fine line can separate interesting content from press release type posts. And we were very concerned that if iLevel was seen merely as a marketing tool, that we would lose our audience very fast. If this was just seen as a place where we posted press releases, then people would lose interest. So by defining our blog's parameters from the outset, we would scrutinize each post as it developed to make sure that we weren't getting too close to this press release line here. We wanted to be authentic and truthful and transparent, and most of all, we wanted to use a human voice whenever possible with the blog social network. And this wasn't quite the social blogosphere that we were going for. This was more of what we were going for. And now what we are finding is that our blog is becoming the foundation rather than the only part of our Web 2.0 strategy. It's an expanding area for us. This past year, we created a Flickr group where people could upload their photographs taken at SAM into a common area. And a couple weeks ago, the Smithsonian joined the Flickr Commons with the Library of Congress and the Powerhouse Museum from Sydney. as well. And as moderator of this Flickr group, I made connections between the museum and those photographers in the group, offering encouragement, letting them know about upcoming photo opportunities, and sometimes I find an extraordinary image that might be very useful to our museum in a more traditional vein, in more traditional ways. This was an image that I found on our Flickr photo stream, and our director and our head of public affairs thought that this was better than some of the photographs that we had hired a professional photographer to take. By the way, this is a picture of our interior courtyard. It's very beautiful and a wonderful place. It's becoming sort of a commons within the museum. We have Wi-Fi there, we have a restaurant there, and so people are coming. It's totally air conditioned, and Washington in the summertime is not only hot but very humid. So there are lots of people here during the day, and there are events here in the evening as well. And this shows at dusk as the sun was going down. So I made contact with a photographer, and I got rights to use this photograph in our print media. So I'm starting to see a synergy between our museum's main website and eye level. Both are top refers to each other, keeping our viewers interested in our content for much longer periods of time. And I think one of the things that we have to talk about is, metrics, is statistics. Our director wants to know, how successful we are. And when we tell her that our blog is getting 7,000 to 9,000 visits per month, she said, okay, well, I understand that, but how does that compare with other blogs? So we're constantly having to sort of look at these statistics and interpret what they mean, but really nobody understands exactly what they mean. Nobody in museum blogging really understands what's good, what isn't good. If we get a lot of comments, is that good? If we don't get any comments, is that bad? Early on, my boss said, well, we're not getting any comments. And yesterday, the gentleman talked about how there were 0 comments on blog posts. Is this the only metric? Is this the only mark of success for a blog? I would say no, it's not. But it's really nice when we get comments. And what I found is, in order to have a successful blog post, conventional wisdom tells us that stories that are current or stories that are controversial get the highest number of comments. And of course, we weren't going to be that current. We weren't going to. A month or so ago, Robert Rauschenberg, the artist, died. All of a sudden, blog posts were coming up, talking about Robert Rauschenberg. We didn't publish a story on Robert Rauschenberg for a month after he died. And what we tried to do is we tried to create a blog post that connected him with the museum. We gave him his first one-person show in 1976. We interviewed somebody who brought a lot of the avant-garde in the 1960s to Washington. We included that in the story. So if we're not being current and if we're not being controversial, how are we going to get comments? Well, since our initial blogger, the one who we hired when we first started blogging, who had a blogging experience and had an art historical background, most of his stories were more art criticism, and we realized that that may not be the best style for drawing people in. We recently, at the beginning of this year, we hired a new blogger who actually has no or had no blogging experience, but he had a lot of experience writing from a personal point of view, a personal narrative. And what he has done is he has created a connection between his personal reflections about the artworks in our museum and himself. And so essentially, it's good storytelling. And so I would add to the two things that create successful blog posts, currency and controversy, that accessible writing will help draw people in. And as a way of proving this, the number of comments from January to June of this year was 300% more than the same period last year. It was actually 324%, but when I kept repeating that exact percentage, people thought, that I was trying to pile it on. So I just said 300%. So, the one other statistic that I thought was really important is, again, from January to June, iLevel sent 71,000 visitors from iLevel to our main blog, to our main website. And I think that's important to show that we are bringing people into our main website. So iLevel has become a platform for highlighting our buried content. It's part of our long tail strategy. And in fact, we've actually written a couple times over the years about a particular part of our museum. So we can go back we created a website for children called Meet Me at Midnight, about children that go into the museum when it's closed at night and discover an artwork that has come alive. And so when we first published that, we did a blog post about it, but then we realized that we could bring it back again because they're filming a new film. I don't know if what was the name of the film a couple years ago about a museum at night where things come alive? You know what I'm talking about? What is it? Okay. Well, anyway, they're doing a sequel. They're doing a sequel, and this time it's a Smithsonian that's part of this. So it was like at night the Smithsonian comes alive, and so we were able to reconnect our that story about Meet Me at Midnight, about our kids' website. 2 years later. So again, we can just keep going back and forth whenever it seems appropriate to do. So I should also say that we're now beginning to experiment with Twitter. Everybody knows what Twitter is? See? One of the things that we don't want to do is we don't want to use new technologies just for its own sake. We want to use it if we find a reason to use it. And so what we decided is that our London Conservation Center has no schedule, and they, whenever they decide that they're going to work on an artwork, they start working. Yet people don't know, our visitors to the museum don't know when they're actually working. So sometimes they come to the London Conservation Center and nobody is there and nothing is happening. So just last week, I got the center, the London Center, on Twitter. They have their own account, and they are posting tweets. They're posting little Twitter posts. I'm about to start working on this artwork now. So people are starting to follow our conservators, and there are a lot of conservation groupies who really are into conservation. A lot of them who live in DC and want to know, when can I see somebody working on artwork? But what we're also trying to do is we're trying to take Twitter and actually connect it to our lobby screens in the lobbies of our museum, so that when they post a little Twitter post, that visitors coming into the museum can see, they're working on an artwork now, let's go up and see them. do that. So we think that's a really good use of technology, of Twitter specifically. This was a blog post that I did at the end of last year. This photograph is a close-up of one of our folk art pieces called Bottle Cap Giraffe. And I found this on Flickr, this photograph. It's a giraffe that's made entirely of bottle caps. And so somebody took a close-up of it, and I published this on the blog. And a viewer wrote a comment saying that he was so inspired by this that he decided to create his own artwork with bottle caps, and he posted this on his own blog. And this is exactly the type of interaction that we want between our museum and our viewers. People who are inspired by looking at our art and take it one step further, and of course document it. And this is really good to show our director, because it shows that we're reaching out and we're connecting with our viewers. So let's see. We're still trying to determine, and I think we'll never know exactly why a blog post is so popular and why certain ones are popular and certain ones are not. On my own blog, all of a sudden, I realize that a story has been picked up, and I just, even though I've been blogging personally for almost 9 years, I still am surprised sometimes when a blog post that I write connects with the social networks of discovery. So to sum it up, could we create an interesting dialogue about American art and still maintain a comfort level within the museum? As we moved from a broadcast mode of disseminating information to a conversational one. Our strategy was to move slowly and adjust continually to monitor our progress. We are constantly adding new story ideas to the mix to help ensure our success. Eye Level began as an attempt to connect our artworks to the American experience in a new way. We wanted to create an interaction between our web offerings and our bricks and mortar activities. We wanted to create new web content on an ongoing basis and in an efficient manner. We wanted to allow viewers a behind-the-scenes look at what takes place in our museum, and we wanted to connect to the internet social networks to enlarge our audiences and ultimately to bring people into our museum. So our success can be attributed to adopting a process that allows for growth, as well as connecting Eye Level to the changing roles of our museum at the beginning of the 21st century. And in many ways, our experience has led to more questions than to answers, but I'm okay with that. We wonder how we can reach out to an even wider audience. And I don't know what your experience is, but we're still, even though we've been doing this for 2.5 years, we're still being asked by our administration to justify what we do. It's just an ongoing process for us. But I am starting to see that our blog is the first step in new engagement with our community, and we're starting to see what our next step is. I just want to point out that this was a story that I did a couple years ago. I don't know in Spain if you've gotten the American program Desperate Housewives? Yes, okay. So, you know the story, you know the people. Okay, great. So, I was watching Desperate Housewives, and Bree is, one of the housewives, is angry at her husband Orson for the umpteenth time. And so I'm watching this, and they're having an argument, and I realize in the background is one of our paintings. And I'm going, oh my God, you know, it's like, I'm aware of product placement, you know, in movies, you see this all the time, but did they realize they didn't, of course they didn't ask us for permission to use this, but I thought this is really good. And so what I did is I wrote a blog post about why this particular painting was appropriate to breed. And then I decided that I would offer the producers of the program other artworks in our collection for the other desperate housewives. And I explained, you know, just why I thought this should be. And then, as a strategy, I posted a link to this on all the forums for desperate housewives. You know, all the TV forums, so people would come. And I think that's part of a really good strategy, is when you see an opening, take it. We did a blog post a few months ago about a piece that an artist, de Kooning, did called Mercy, about Merce Cunningham, the choreographer. And our writer connected it to a performance at the Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C., one of Merce Cunningham's pieces, where everybody was given an iPod with the soundtrack to listen to as they conducted this. And so we brought in our painting to what was going on at the Shakespeare Theater, and then I wrote one of the top Apple blogs about what we did, and they posted a link to this, and so that, you know, our stats went shot right up when we do that. So I try and do that. I try and see it opening whenever I can. Es todo por este día.